My voice. On Monday, when if you don't mind, opening to Daniel chapter 1. Daniel chapter 1, and we're going to read from verse 1 to 1 through 8. No, I'm sorry, 1 through 9, and then we're going to skip down to verse 17, and we're going to read from 17 to 20. Daniel chapter 8. And I'm going to read the odd verses if you have your Bible, if you don't mind reading the even verses. Daniel chapter 1, verse 1. In the third year of the reign of Jehoiakim, king of Judah, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came to Jerusalem and Egypt.
And the Lord
king of Judah, to stand along with some of the articles from the temple of God. They used to carry out to the temple and put in treasure of his God.
Then the king ordered Ashpenaz, the chief of his officials, to bring in some of the sons of Israel, including some of the royal family and of the nobles.
Young men without any physical defects, handsome, showing aptitude for every kind of learning, well informed, quick to understand, and qualified to serve in the king's place, who was to teach them the language and literature of the Babylonians.
The king appointed for them a daily ration from the king's choice food and from the wine which he drank, and appointed that they should be educated 3 years, at the end of which they were to enter the king's personal service.
Among those who were chosen were some from Judah, Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah.
Then the commander of the officials assigned new names to them, and to Daniel he assigned the name Belteshazzar, to Hananiah Shadrach, to Mishael Meshach, to Azariah Abednego.
But Daniel followed himself with the royal food and wine, and he asked the chief official for permission not to defile himself this way.
Now God granted Daniel favor and compassion in the sight of the commander of the officials. Now we're going to skip down to verse 17. As for these 4 youths, God gave them knowledge and intelligence in every branch of literature and wisdom. Daniel even understood all kinds of visions and dreams.
At the end of the time set by the king to bring with his servants, the chief official presented them
The king talked with them, and out of them all, not one was found like Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, Azariah. So they entered the king's personal service.
in every matter of wisdom and understanding about which the king questioned them. He found them times better than all the musicians and the translations.
So the setting of this story takes place during the time of the exile. At that time, the Babylonians captured Judah, and because of Judah disobedient to God, God had warned them time and time again through the prophets that if they don't repent, the entire city, the entire nation will be captured. And people of the people of Judah at that time, they thought that how could we, we're a nation of God. How could we be conquered by another nation? After all, we have the temple, because the temple, built by Solomon originally, was a very significant, identity for Judah. The kingdom at that time has split into the northern and southern kingdom. The northern kingdom is Israel, the southern kingdom is Judah. And Judah has a capital of Jerusalem. Jerusalem is where the temple is. And the people at that time, both in Israel and Judah, they have abandoned God and they worship idols. And God had sent them warnings through the prophets to prophet of Isaiah, Jeremiah, Ezekiel, warning them that there will be a time when God will punish the nations if they don't repent. And this is the time when the punishment came, and the whole nation was conquered by Babylonian. And the king of Babylonian, Nebuchadnezzar, they had special interest in the young men of Judah, especially of those of nobility. They were to be brought in. They were to be, brought for the service of the Babylonians. Now, Daniel and his friends, they were among those group of young men that were brought in to the service of the new king. Keep in mind that Daniel at that time, he was young. He was probably, in his teens, maybe like some of you are right now. He was probably, historians, estimated that his age was probably between like 15 to 18 years old. He was, he was pretty young. And the Bible also says that he was very good looking. He was young, good looking, he was smart. He was an ideal type of young man at that time. So they were brought into Babylonians by the Babylonians. They were brought in to be reprogrammed by the king. They were brought in to be reprogrammed to knock God out of their system, out of their lives. So they were taught new language. So they would act and speak like the Chaldeans or the Babylonians. They were taught literature. So that they would think like them. Because through literature is where ideas and philosophies are smuggled in. Those of you who are going to college right now, don't be surprised if you go to college, or if you are going to college, if the professor that you have has an agenda, and his or her agenda is to knock God out of you. I went to a secular university, and I took philosophy class as a mandatory, course I had to take, and none of my classmates, I don't think that even the professors, they were believers. You study about all these philosophies, and you have to take liberal studies. And believe it or not, there is a professor that is very blatant up front with you, and they would tell it to you that their goal is to deconstruct what you have learned and reconstruct it with their idea, with their ideology. If you're a Christian, their agenda is to knock God out of you, to reprogram you. And we see today in TVs, the entertainment that we watch, that we hear, is through the arts, through literature, is where they smuggle in ideas, where they smuggle in philosophies to reprogram our thinking without us knowing it, so that we would think and we would accept the philosophy of the world. Think about the songs that we hear. If you hear one certain song over and over and over again, and then you don't guard your mind to what you hear, you may end up accepting what that song says. Regardless if the song, what it says, what the lyrics says is true or not. Think about what you read, what you see on the television screen, or what you watch in the theaters. They smuggle in this idea, this propaganda, and then if we don't guard our hearts and our minds, we may end up just thinking that it's okay. The idea that they're offering you that it's okay. So Daniel and his friends, they were taught the new language, they were taught philosophy, so that they can, with the thinking that they can knock God out of them. That the philosophy of the Chaldeans, the pagan philosophy, can enter into their mind, and then they can become one. They can become like one of them. Now, there are three lessons that we can learn from the story that we just read about Daniel, how he stood firm even at such a young age, in the middle of his situation. First, he left his home. He was brought in by force, and he left his people there. He left his hometown, I should say. And then he's in a new environment, he's in a new situation, and now he has to deal with all kinds of temptations, all kinds of allurement that were being offered to him. But yet he stood still and he stood firm. And we can learn the three principles from his life, about how to stand firm, especially as a young man and woman, today. And all of you guys here have a very good, you live in a challenging times, especially being a college student. And Austin is going to college, Kristen, so I don't think we have any more high schoolers here in this group. One more, a couple more. Yeah, and before you know it, you too will enter college pretty soon. And the times have changed. Even 10, 15, 20 years ago when I was in high school and when I went to college, times have changed dramatically. Internet is a lot more, faster. We had dial-up back then. Information is a lot more easier. Registration is a lot easier. You just go online and register rather than waiting in line to get a class. A lot of things is a lot easier. It's more accessible. But at the same time, the culture has changed so much too because of the social media, of the internet. All these rampant ideas that are being thrown around, at the speed of light, basically, that are being tossed around, and a lot of change. And this is a challenging time, and then this is probably, the test of your faith here to see where you stand in terms of your commitment to God. Now, Daniel, when he was brought in, he wasn't brought in like the other exiles, he and his friends. They were brought in, and then they had special treatment. They had special treatment, and then they were brought in, they were to eat at the king's table. They were to enjoy the finest food. They were to be given wine. They were to be given all kinds of meat, all kinds of feasts. Delicious food. I love to eat, especially Korean barbecue. It's like Korean barbecue, all you can eat. It's a lot of fun. You have so many choices. Now, Daniel probably had better than Korean barbecue, and they were giving him all kinds of allurement, all kinds of entertainment that was available at that time. But yet we can see Daniel had made a decision in his heart from the beginning not to defile himself. The first lesson that we can learn here is that he learned how to train his appetite. He learned how to train his appetite. Now, the first thing that the devil tries to do to knock God out of you is not through philosophy, it's not through some kind of so-called scientific discovery or something, or whether or not God exists. Believe it or not, the first thing that the devil tries to knock God out of you is through what? Is through moral choices. It's through moral choices. The allurement, the temptations, whatever it is, the moral temptations, all the pleasures that are offered, same thing like Daniel, all the pleasures that were offered to him, because once you surrender, once you succumb to the pressure and you follow the lustful desire of your heart, that's when you start questioning your morality. That's when you start enjoying life as a sinner and being sinful, I should say. That's when you start enjoying sin, I should say. And then that's when you start questioning about God and start forgetting about God. The first thing that a lot of colleges, believe it or not, that they do to knock God out of you is they tempt you morally. I don't know about now, but I know in the past, at least during my time, is you see Berkeley, if you stay in the dorm, they have a quiet bathroom. Or quiet dorm or something. Quiet bathroom. My friend who has gone there told me the same thing too. I don't know about now. Think about that. That's a moral temptation. And when I went to college, I stayed in the dorm. Across from my room, there, my hallmate, he had girls all the time coming into his room. And his computer, his screensaver, is a very appropriate picture of a lady. And he publicly displayed, and his posters, were very questionable posters too. And then, at that time we had a RA, resident assistant, who monitored the door. He doesn't even say a word about it. He just in fact, he encourages promiscuity. Now, and then I took liberal studies, also because I had to. And then they were promoting all kinds of these lifestyles. And then all the parties that were available for you to attend also in college. And some of them are sponsored by fraternity, by school-sponsored events. So the first thing that, that the devil tried to knock out of you is through what? Through your moral choices. Now, through the pleasures, to the allurement of this world. Daniel was offered all these things, all the allurement of this world, but he learned how to train his appetite. And he said to the kings, who serve him, the commander of the officials, and said, I don't want to eat all this food. He learned to train his appetite. I don't want to eat all this food because he knows that he doesn't want to succumb to the temptation, because it starts with a very little thing. It starts with a very little thing, and then it's like a fire. It starts with a spark, and then before you know it, it burned the whole mountain. Like the fire that we had in Glendora back in February. I live in Azusa. I saw the fire from my bedroom. It was really scary, and it started by a couple of high schoolers. A couple of high schoolers, and I think one, he graduated high school. They went up to Glendora. They were going to smoke, and then before you know it, you had fire all over Glendora Mountain and all the way to Azusa and to Warning. It started with a little thing. And Daniel knew about it. He had made the decision that he trained his appetite. He trained not to desire the things that God had said no to. He didn't eat, he didn't eat the food. He didn't eat at the king's, he didn't eat all, he didn't have the wine. He didn't eat all the food that were offering, that they offered. Instead, he ate vegetables. He was faithful to God. And notice when he was faithful to God, right? God also is always faithful to him. God is always faithful to those who are faithful to him. And God looks after his children. God sees what you do. God sees you when you honor him. It may sound like you're a loser, but God sees you and he honors you. I remember years ago I had to make a tough choice. Either I have to follow God, or I have to do this other stuff that people think is cool. And it took me a while, and then I finally decided, you know what, I gotta do, it doesn't matter. If I'm at a loss here, if people see, if I were, and if I were to think that it's a loss for me, but I decided, it's better to honor God. Until years later, that I look back and I realized, from making that decision, how God saved me from all the troubles, all the consequences that I might have to deal with if I didn't honor God at that time. And all the blessings that came afterward, because God honors those who honor him. Now, God gave us this body, and this body is not to be abused. Instead, this body, we have to use it for his glory. Learn to train your appetite. And don't go over the boundaries that God has set for us. A lot of times when we see the fence, when we see a fence, we wonder what's on the other side. When we have rules, people tend to wonder what happens if we break them. The reason God put those boundaries, those rules, those moral rules for us, is not to restrict us, but is to protect us. Is to to save us, to keep us safe. Because we can't see beyond the fence, but God sees everything from the top, and He knows what lies beyond the fence. That's why God put the boundaries to protect us. The second lesson that we can learn from Daniel is to depend on God and pray for wisdom. Daniel, he really, if you read the whole book of Daniel, throughout the entire book about Daniel, you could see that he really prayed a lot. He's a man of prayer. And he's always asking God for wisdom. Let me ask you, how often do you pray? Every day. At least 3 times a day. Breakfast, lunch, and dinner. How often do you pray? Or is it when you have a difficult situation that when you pray, oh God, I have an exam today. I need to do well. Or maybe, you like a person, you want to go on a date or something. You pray to God, God, hopefully, I don't have something stuck on my mouth when I meet this person. Or maybe I hope she likes me, or something like that. Or I hope he likes me, Or maybe when you're in trouble. Now, how often do you pray to God every day? The Bible tells us to pray without ceasing, to pray continuously. To just communicate with God. Even when things are going well, just give honor and glory to God. When things are going well, you're at the beach, you see the good weather, you glorify God. You pray to Him, God, thank you for this weather. Thank you for the amazing view. Just praying to God. And then, not only when things are bad that you pray, when things are good too, but learn to be a person of prayer, to be a man and woman of prayer. So Daniel prayed to God. He dedicated his time to pray to God. He asked God for wisdom. That's the thing about Solomon. When God asked Solomon, what do you want? Give you everything. Solomon didn't ask for wealth. He didn't ask for long life. He didn't ask for good health. He asked for what? He asked for wisdom. Because we need God's wisdom in our lives. Because we need to make choices every day in our lives. A lot of times those choices we don't know if it's right or wrong. Especially choices that are not involving moral decisions. We don't know if it's right or wrong. We don't know if we're going to the right school, if we're taking the right major, or anything. We have to pray God for wisdom. Pray to God for wisdom. Now, if you turn to chapter 2 later on, maybe tonight, okay, it's a good story, a good example how Daniel prayed and asked God for wisdom. So King Nebuchadnezzar, he had a dream. And it really bothered him about this dream. And he didn't know, he wanted to know what's the meaning of this dream. So in this, in chapter 2, he calls all the wise men, all the wise people, all the sorcerers, the enchanters, the fortune tellers, all the noblemen, and he tells them to come to him, and he tells them, I had a dream, and I need you to tell me what the dream is and its interpretation. Obviously, no one can know what another person is dreaming about or has dreamt a lot the night before. I don't know what some of you, if you dream every night, I don't know what your dream is. Right? So they're very smart. They said to the king, King, why don't you tell us what the dream is, and we tell you the interpretation. And the king says, I don't want to do that. Then how do I know that you're not lying? So the only way that I know that you're not lying is if you tell me, if you know what my dream is, and then the interpretation, then I know that you're not lying. Or else I'll kill you all. That's what it says. That's what the king says in chapter 2. Now Daniel, everybody knows. Only God can know. Only God knows. So Daniel says, right? He prayed to God. He prayed to God. The very first thing that he did, he prayed to God. He asked God to help him. And he asked God for wisdom. Okay? Because the dream and its interpretation was not favorable to the king. But yet, because he has confidence in God, and then because he has trained his life to be committed to God. He's a man of prayer. He comes before the king, tells the king what the dream is and its interpretation. Praying to God and always ask for wisdom. Always depend on God. You never know how God works in your life. You never know. A lot of times God works in our lives is God works behind the scene. God works through the circumstances of your life. God works through the circumstances of your life. How God put things together, put the pieces together, and then boom, after that everything happened. And then you can't help but wonder, this is what God is doing. There's no other explanation other than God. Maybe I shared this with you a while back ago. How many of you remember what's the Insanity? What's the Insanity, right? If you have Netflix, you can watch it on Netflix. I think they have it on YouTube too. Someone uploaded it to me. Most of you know Jeremy Lin. He signed with the Lakers now. I'm not a Lakers fan. I'm a Jeremy Lin fan. Now this season, the first time in 18 years, I'm going to start watching the Lakers again. I'm sorry, I stopped watching the Lakers when Kobe was drafted. Anyway, so in Linsanity, Jeremy Lin is a Christian. He, in the movie, he tells a story how everything started, how he got a chance to show his skills in New York. Austin, you probably remember this, because he was drafted by the Warriors. First, he wasn't drafted at all. He was invited to the summer camp by the Dallas Mavericks as a free agent. And he wasn't getting enough playing time. Also, in the summer league. This is summer league. Summer, where the players are supposed to showcase their skill. He wasn't getting enough playing time. All those players with some guaranteed contracts, they get to play first. And one of them got injured. So he got to play. And it happened against the Washington Wizards. Washington Wizards at that time drafted John Wall. He was the #1 draft pick. And here you have Jeremy Lin. This is the time that he really first got his significant playing time in the summer league. He was playing against the #1 draft pick, John Wall from Kentucky. High school player of the year or something. Went to 1 year in college. And he played well. In limited minutes, I think he scored like 19 points. He stole a couple of balls from John Wall. And then he just made John Wall look bad. Because of that impressive performance in the summer league, he got a contract offer with the Golden State Warriors. So he played with the Golden State Warriors. And his rookie year, he was sent back to the D League a couple of times. He played, limited minutes. And the second season with the Warriors, they finally cut him. They waived him. And then the Houston Rockets claimed him. And then on Christmas Eve, he was cut by the Houston Rockets on Christmas Eve. He thought, his NBA career is over. And then that night, a couple days later or something, the New York Knicks playing Jeremy Lin to be on the roster. The problem was the Knicks hardly had too many point guards. They have Mike Bibby, if you know Mike Bibby. Mike Bibby was a good player, he retired now. They have Darren Davis, who was a former All-Star, right? And then they have some other guards. And then he was probably like a third, fourth string point guards. And he wasn't even getting some time in practice. And the Knicks coach at that time was Mike D'Antoni, who coached the Lakers. You know, people joke about Mike D'Antoni because there's no defense. There's no, Mike, no D'Antoni. Now anyway, and at that time he said that, this is in his testimony, that because it was a lockout season, every team must at least play 3 back-to-back games, back-to-back games, 3 games in a row. Usually in the regular NBA season, you only play back-to-back games, 2 nights in a row. But because of the lockout season, you play 3 nights straight. So they play 3 nights straight, and then some of the point guards, like Mike Bibby was getting old, and then Darren Davis was hurt, he was injured, and the coach had no choice to put him in. And Jeremy Lin, he thought that he was going to get cut too, because in practice, he asked Mike D'Antoni, should I bring my car to New York just to get an answer of where he's at on the team, whether or not he's going to be waived. And then Mike D'Antoni said, you probably don't need to ship your car over here. So he thought, I'm going to be waived anyway. Because if his answer is that, no, don't ship your car over here, it's probably going to be waived. So, but because of the back-to-back games and some point guards were injured, he got a chance to play. He said he played bad the first time he got a chance to play, and then the next night he played. Basically says, I'm just gonna do my best. And that was against, I think, against the New Jersey Nets, against Darren Williams, another top point guard. And at that time, insanity happened, and he gave that testimony. You can go to YouTube too, and he went to Taiwan and he shared the testimony about Jesus Christ about that. Basically, my point is, he says that God works behind the scenes. He put all those pieces together. Who would have known that all these point guards on the New York Knicks would get hurt? Who would have thought that they had to play back-to-back games? They were running out of players. The players were getting old and tired. And against John Wall too. How did somebody get hurt so he could get the playing time against John Wall? So he could get the exposure. So a lot of times God works behind the scene in our life. When we depend on God, the way Daniel did. Even though it may seem like, oh God, where are you? I don't feel you in my life. God is always working. God is always working. He works a lot of times in our life through the circumstances. He works behind the scenes. He put all the pieces together. That's the second lesson. Now the third lesson is that we can learn from Daniel is have confidence in God. Have confidence in God. Let God do the work. A lot of times it's difficult for us to let God do the work. Isn't it? It's difficult. We want to do things our own way to make things happen. There are many times when God just wants us, to just stay still and let God do the work for us. There are parts that we are responsible for. There are parts that are out of our control. There are parts that are out of our reach. And the part that we can't control, we shouldn't try to take over. We shouldn't try to get, control it. We should let God do the work. Because when God does the work, the end product is nothing but praise and glory to Him. Have confidence in God. The only, a good way to build your confidence in God is to look back on what God has done for you in the past. The only way to build your confidence in God, okay, right, to build your faith, is to look back to what God has done for you in the past. When God talked to Israel throughout the Old and in the Old Testament, what did God always say to them? He always reminded them when God took them out of Egypt, right, and crossed the sea, right, being chased by the Egyptians king, and when God parted the sea, and then all the armies, were swallowed by the water, right, and then how God took them to the wilderness, provided them with food until they reached the promised land. God always reminded them of the past, so that we would have confidence in Him. Count your blessings. Remember what God has done in the past for your lives. That's how we build our faith. That's how we have confidence, how we can have confidence in God, is to remember what God has done in the past. The same thing like when you're rowing. When you row, you don't look to the front, especially in the competition. Have you seen those Olympic competition when you row? Right? Your back is against the direction that you're going. But how do you know that you're going in the right direction? You look at the places that you've been, the places that you pass, and then you know that you're going in the right direction. How do you know your life is going in the right direction? How do you know that your life is going in the right direction? How do you know that God is leading your life? You look back at what God has done in your life, and you see the pieces that God has put together for you, all the blessings, all the guidance that He has given you, His providence, His hands on your life, and you can have confidence in God to move forward. That's why God gives us this book, the Holy Bible. The Holy Bible is a history, basically, of what God has done in the past, so we can have confidence in Him. So look back to what God has done in the past, have confidence in Him. Train your appetite, depend on God, and ask for wisdom, and pray for wisdom. Be a person of prayer, and have confidence in God. So those are the three things that we can learn from the end of the